Thank you for being with us today. My name is David Douglas. Thank you for tuning in here to our family history YouTube channel entitled the Douglas Family History YouTube channel. Thank you for being with us today. In our last video, we had talked about as far as the Douglas family and the Fleming family connection and how both of these families were connected. And I believe that both of these families are the same family. And I sort of left off with Siegfried the Dane, the first Count of Gwens. And going back in one of our videos about the Douglas family in Scotland and also the Douglas family in England and on in with the Fleming family, William D. Douglas, and he was the first Douglas man to take on the Douglas name, and is derived, from the Gaelic term Dub Glass, which means black water or dark stream. But this William D. Douglas had kind of been, been said about him, for him, being a Viking. Or either, he descended from a Viking line, of a Viking family. So today I want to talk about the Douglas family Viking-Saxon connection. And I believe that I have found out, where a lot of people have believed, through the years and through their research that some way this Douglas family, was connected from a Viking line. And I believe that I have, found that. So I'm going to talk about the Douglas family Viking and even Saxon connection. So like I said, we left off with Siegfried, and they had nicknamed him the Dane because he came also from a Danish descent. The first Count of Gwens, his father was Theodoric of Ringelheim. And like I said, Siegfried, his descendants, the Fleming family, came from that line. In fact, Theobald Fleming, who was William de Douglas's father, he was born 1120, died 1193. His father was Sir Michael Fleming, who was born around 1095 and died 1154. Then Michael Fleming's father was William Fleming, born around 1074. Then his father was Archibald, the first one to take on the title Fleming, which means from Flanders or Flemish-speaking people. So Archibald Fleming, who was William Fleming's father, was born about 1024 in Rouen, Normandy, France. And he died about 1100 when he had came to England with William the Conqueror around after, and it was after the Battle of Hastings, the way that I have researched it, after 1066, somewhere around 1067 and 1068, Archibald Fleming came into England and became a landholder. And his name is in what they call, the England's Doomsday Book. So Archibald Fleming's father was Archibald, the Viscount of Rouen, and he was born approximately 990 and died 1043. His father, I believe in my research that I found that his father, and I know some other believes this too, that his father was Raoul, the third Count of Gwens. This is Gwens, France. And he was born approximately 956, died 1036. Then Raoul's father was Adolf, the second Count of Gwens, born about 930. Then his father is the man that I left off with in our last video, and his name was Siegfried. And he had the title of really being the first Count of Gwens. So, his father was named Theodoric of Ringelheim, and his mother was Reginhild de Friesland. Though through his father and mother, I'm going to really show you the Viking-Saxon connection with the Douglas family. Ringelheim is an area in a place called Lower Saxony, which is actually in the northern part of what you would say today, modern-day Germany. Theodoric of Ringelheim, married Reginhild de Friesland, the daughter of Godfried, Duke of Frisia. First, I want to talk about the Douglas connection with the Saxon line of this family, and then later on we'll talk about the Viking connection, which is through Theodoric of Ringelheim. Theodoric and Reginhild had these children. Wittikin was one of their sons, and Emmed, Amared of Ringelheim, and Matilda of Ringelheim. She's the one that married the Emperor Henry I, what they called the Fowler. Then another daughter, Frederick of Ringelheim, and she married King Charles III of France. They had a son named Lambert of Ringelheim, and then last but not least, Siegfried the Dane, who became the first Count of Gwens. Now, Theodoric of Ringelheim, it's his ancestors that takes us through the Saxon line. But then his wife, her line goes into the Vikings. So Theodoric of Ringelheim was born approximately 828 in Ringelheim, Lower Saxony, like I said, which is actually modern-day Germany. The year of death has been undetermined. Theodoric of Ringelheim, his father was Reginhard, Count of Ringelheim. This is a family, had a lot to do as far as with nobility in that area. They had position, they had authority. So his father was Reginhard, Count of Ringelheim, and mother was Mathilda von Saxon. Reginhard, Count of Ringelheim, died in 891 in Ringelheim, Lower Saxony. Reginhard, Count of Ringelheim's father was Walbert, Count of Ringelheim. You know what I mentioned about, in one book about Siegfried came as far as to obtain as far as an inheritance, and mentioned some way that even through the bloodline, he was kin to a man named Walbert. But that Walbert had gave up his land around 660-something. But I wonder if the one that was doing research got mixed up, and this was the Walbert here. So, like I said, Siegfried come from this line. So, Reginhard, Count of Ringelheim, his father was Walbert, Count of Ringelheim, and his mother's name was Aldburg. And their children was Witchbert. The second one was Reginhard, Count of Ringelheim, which is one of my ancestors, and Elamar. Then they had a daughter, which is unnamed. Then Walbert, Count of Ringelheim, was born 800 in Ringelheim, Lower Saxony, Germany, and he died 856 in Ringelheim. His father was Witchbert, Duke of Saxony. He carried the title of Duke of Saxony, and his mother was Onrad, or otherwise even went by the name Garada. So Witchbert, Duke of Saxony, he was born 778 in Lower Saxony, and he would actually die around 876 in Ringelheim, Lower Saxony. His father was Wittikin, however you want to pronounce it, but I've mainly heard it pronounced Wittikin, King of Saxony. And I know some do not put as far as this Wittikin as a king, but he was a leader of the Saxons there in Lower Saxony. But some have even placed him as far as king because he was leading his people as far as even, against tyranny of that day, or what they looked at as tyranny. Otherwise, another group of people coming in, trying to control and rule over them. So, and his mother was Jiva. She was the sister of Sigurd, the first king of Hathabu. So here's a Viking actually coming in, but it is through Wittikin's wife, Jiva. She was actually of a Viking descent. Now, Jiva and Sigurd, I don't know if their father has ever been, as far as in research, found. I mean, he might have been. So, but here I call Wittikin the king of Saxony. He was their leader. He was the leader of the Saxon people. Said he had rebelled against Charles I, king of France, also known as Charlemagne. And this took place around 777. It was said that after that rebellion, he fled to Denmark and went into hiding under Sigurd, the first king of Hathabu. And this is where he met his wife Jiva, otherwise there, in Denmark. Under, kind of went into, I reckon, hiding, so to speak, to be safe. So, Wittikin rebelled again, after he kind of, got his barons together, so to speak, and got his army raised up. He rebelled against Charlemagne around 778. Now here, Charlemagne would defeat Wittikin, and Wittikin surrendered. He got tired, and of all the battles and the bloodshed. So Wittikin surrendered, and he submitted to be baptized into the Christian faith. And Charlemagne stood in as his godfather at his baptism. Wittikin, king of Saxony, would die about 807. And that is the Douglas-Saxon bloodline. Now, even in my DNA test, it would even come up as far as about a certain percentage being of the Germanic tribe. And this one tribe, and there were several tribes in the Germanic tribe, and Wittikin was over Lower Saxony. So this is probably where my DNA comes in as far as the Germanic tribe. So my paper trail and even my DNA is all lining up the way I see it. Now I want to talk about the Douglas family and the Viking connection. Siegfried the Dane, the first Count of Gwen's mother, was Reginhild de Friesland, who was the daughter of Godfrey, Duke of Frisia. Frisia is actually in the area in Netherlands, where the Dutch people are at today, kind of right there on the coast. Godfrey, Duke of Frisia, was born around 820 in Hathabu, Denmark. He was of the Viking descent, and he would marry Gisela. Godfrey's father was none other than King Harald Clack Halfdanson, Viking king of Denmark. You remember what I said about Siegfried? They said, even in that book written about, the counts of Gwen, it had mentioned about Siegfried being the offspring of one of the kings of Denmark, a Viking king. So I believe my paper trail has led to that, and even other people's research. And I know I'm not the only one. There's been others. And I've taken even others' research, and it has helped me, and I did my own to try to piece all this together. So, Godfrey, it said here, Godfrey was given the title Duke of Frisia by Charles II. He was an emperor and a ruler. Said, and this is the same territory which his father, King Harald Clack Halfdanson, received as what they call a fief, F-I-E-F. He's like a landholder, And then they did this to kind of, and with their treaties back then, with King Charles and these Vikings to kind of, settle things down, to give him this authority. And it was given to him by Louis I. Godfrey, Duke of Frisia, was summoned one day to a place called Lobeth for a meeting. He was accused of insurrection, and when he arrived at the meeting, he and his men were slaughtered by some Frisians and Saxons in the year 885. Now, some wants to say that Siegfried's father was Godfrey. A lot of researchers have placed that. But Godfrey died before Siegfried was born, so I don't believe there's no way that Godfrey can be his father, but he is Siegfried's grandfather. Godfrey's wife was named Gisela. She was the illegitimate daughter of King Lothair II. Now I want to talk about Godfrey's father, the Duke of Frisia. Godfrey's father was King Harald Clack Halfdanson, who was born 800 in Hathabu, Denmark. And his father was King Halfdan Haraldsson, and his mother's name is unknown. He was king of the Vikings in Hathabu, Denmark. King Harald Clack Halfdanson. And when you see these names, and when they end as far as in son, it actually means, that he was the son of a man named Halfdan. So King Harald Clack Halfdanson and his wife, the queen, and his son Godfrey, when he was just a little boy, and also about 400 Danes, sailed up the Rhine River one day. That is in present-day Germany. They arrived at a place called St. Albans Abbey. It's a church near a place called Mainz. And he was baptized into the Christian faith on June the 28th, 826. June the 28th, 826. Harald Clack Haraldsson and his wife and his son Godfrey and 400 men was baptized into the Christian faith. The first Viking, if I remember right, was the first Viking and even Viking king to be baptized. And so it said, Emperor Louis I the Pious stood in as Harald Clack's godfather for Harold, and Judith stood in as the godmother of King Harold's wife, the queen, and we don't have her name. King Harald the Clack, like I said, was the first Danish king to be baptized. After Harald Clack was banished, after this, Harald Clack, the king of the Vikings, the king of that area, he was banished from Denmark because they didn't believe in the Christian God. They believed in Odin and Thor and all these other Viking, gods, so to speak. So they banished him from Denmark. So Louis I the Pious gave King Harald Clack Halfdanson the territory of Frisia. And later, Godfrey would have that. It's a territory that he would be over. And that is really in the northern part of the Netherlands. And this is probably a good reason that Godfrey, Duke of Frisia, son of Harald Clack, received the same territory some years later. And I believe this places them as father and son. This is almost like deja vu when Godfrey, Duke of Frisia, and Siegfried of Gwens and their descendants also, it said, would even hold in possession Gwens, France. And then Godfrey went in and out of France, and raided it so many times and were trying to hold even Gwens as their possession. King Harald Clack Halfdanson said was killed in a battle. The battle was in a place called Wacheren in 844. Harald Clack Halfdanson's father was King Halfdan Haraldsson, and his mother is unknown as far as her name. King Halfdan Haraldsson was born in 777 in Hathabu, Denmark. His father was King Harold Einsteinason, and his mother was Emhild von Engen, E-N-G-N. And King Halfdan Haraldsson, he would die in a battle in the same place of Wacharian. That kind of was, settling in around there, but there was battles in that area, and he would die in that area of Wacharian in 810, and that was King Halfdan Haraldsson. Then King Haraldsson Einsteinason was born in 746 in Vestfold, Norway. And his father was King Einstein. Do you see the names? Harold Einsteinason was the son of this King Einstein, Halfdanason. And his mother was Hild, Eric's daughter. That gives a last name, otherwise she was the daughter of a man whose name was Eric. I don't know if it was Eric the Red, it don't really come out, to say, which we know, he was a Viking and an explorer. Said, and he would be killed as far as in a battle on the Irish Sea in 804. King Einstein Halfdanason, he was born 725 in Vestfold, Norway. Now, some of my bloodline has even showed up as far as a certain percentage of Denmark, Norway, and even Finland. So there is even that Viking DNA that has showed up in my DNA ancestry test. So King Einstein Halfdanason was born 725 in Vestfold, Norway. And his father was King Halfdan Olafsson, and his mother was Aosa Eisendotter. Otherwise, she was the daughter of a man named Einstein. So Aosa Einstein-daughter. And he died such an untimely death, they said, and it was an unusual death. Said he was struck by a boom on one of his ships in 780, and he died from that accident. His father, Halfdan Olafsson, was born 704. So Halfdan Olafsson, he was the son of a man named Olaf, which I never have found out which one, because there were several King Olafs. So Halfdan Olafsson was born 704 in Norway, and he would live, it's said, to be an old Viking king, and would die in his bed at a place called Toten, which is in Norway. Then they would transport his body and bury under a mound in a place called Skringshall, in a place called Skarid. So I want to close this video, like I said, just to remind you that this confirms people's suspicion. They thought, and even in their research, that William the Douglas was said to be a Viking, or descended from a Viking. So this is where that I believe that my paper trail has sort of ended, for right now. I know that there's further research probably that we can do, and if we do find any further research, we will continue as far as with other videos, and I may even place, some other kind of videos about, the Douglas family. So this, I believe, will show us, as far as even in this line, as far as the Douglas family and the Viking-Saxon connection. See, it goes back to Siegfried the Dane, the first Count of Gwens. His father's line was the Saxon line, and his mother's line was the Viking line, come from the kings, Danish kings in that area, of Norway and these areas where the Vikings came from. So I hope this has helped you maybe in your research. And you can, like I said, even go to my family website, and all you have to do is just Google Dark Stream at Wixsite.com. That's Dark Stream at Wixsite, and that's W-I-X-S-I-T-E. It's a website that we have got our family website on. So maybe you can go into that. If I speak too fast, go into that and find out as far as this same information that I have given you. So like I said, this comes as far as our conclusion right now. We wanted to end it about the Douglas family, the Viking-Saxon connection. Go back over. I've got some more videos on there that takes us from even where I live out here in South Georgia. And I don't live in the area of the Okefenokee Swamp. But our first video was about the Douglas family in the Okefenokee Swamp. And then the next video was the Douglas family in Georgia. Then we went on to the next one, the Douglas family in North Carolina. And then the Douglas family in Virginia. And we showed who the first Douglas that came over as the immigrant to the United States of America. Then we talked about the Douglas family in England. Then the Douglas family in Scotland. Then I talked about the Douglas family and the LaFleming family connection. And now I've ended it with the Douglas family Viking-Saxon connection. So I hope, like I said, this has been a help. Give us a thumbs up. I love to hear from you. Make some comments. Our comments are open. And please subscribe and help us to get word out about our Douglas Family History YouTube channel. Thank you for listening today.